Уважаемые друзья,
Dear friends,
тема моего выступления
the topic of my speech is the situation in the Donbas
и ход специальной военной операции по его
and the
освобождению
course of a special military operation to free it from the neo-Nazi regime that seized power in Ukraine in 2014
в результате вооруженного государственного
as a result of an armed coup.
Обращаюсь сегодня
I am addressing you today
ко всем гражданам,
to all the citizens of our country,
к людям
to
разных
people of different
поколений,
generations,
возраста и
ages and nationalities,
к народу нашей
to the people of our great motherland,
ко всем, кого объединяет большая
to all who are united by
история,
great historical Russia, to the soldiers and officers,
добровольцам, которые
volunteers who are now fighting on the front line,
находятся на боевом
are at the combat post,
нашим братьям и сестрам,
to our brothers and sisters residents of the Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics,
Херсонской,
Kherson and Zaporozhye regions,
других освобожденных.
and other areas liberated from the neo-Nazi regime.
Речь пойдет о необходимых
It will be about the necessary, urgent steps to protect the sovereignty,
безопасности и территориальной,
security and territorial integrity of Russia,
о поддержке стремления и воли
about
наших
supporting the desire and will of our compatriots to determine their own future,
и об
and about the aggressive
части
policy of part of the Western elites
которые всеми силами
who are striving with all their might to maintain their dominance.
а для этого
And for this they are trying to block,
подавить любые суверенные
suppress any sovereign independent development centers
чтобы и
in order to continue to crudely impose their will on other countries and peoples,
насаждать свои
to plant their pseudo-values. The purpose of this West is to weaken,
разобщить и уничтожить.
divide and ultimately destroy our country.
Они уже прямо говорят о том, что
They are already directly saying that in 1991 they were able to split the Soviet Union,
а сейчас пришло
and now the time has come for Russia itself,
что она должна распасться на множество
that it should break up into many regions and regions mortally hostile to each other.
и такие планы
And they have been planning such plans for a long time. They encouraged gangs of international terrorists in the Caucasus.
продвигали наступательную
They
инфраструктуру.
pushed NATO's offensive infrastructure close to our borders.
Они сделали своим оружием,
They made total Russophobia their weapon,
в том числе десятилетия
including for decades they purposefully cultivated hatred for Russia, primarily in Ukraine, for which they were preparing the fate of an anti-Russian foothold.
а сам украинский народ
And they turned the Ukrainian people into cannon fodder, and they pushed them to war with our country,
развязав её,
unleashing it,
эту войну
this war,
ещё в 2014
back in 2014,
используя
using the armed forces against the civilian population. They organized genocide, blockade,
террор в отношении людей, которые
terror against people who refused to recognize the power that arose in Ukraine as a result of a coup.
а после того, как
And after the current Kiev regime actually publicly refused a peaceful solution to the Donbas problem,
и более того,
and, moreover, it declared its claims to nuclear weapons,
стало абсолютно,
it became absolutely clear to us that a new, yet another,
как это уже
as it had happened twice before,
крупномасштабное наступление на
large-scale attack on Donbas is inevitable.
а затем также
And then, just as inevitably,
и атака на Россию.
there would have been an attack on the Russian Crimea on Russia.
В этой связи
In this regard, the decision on a preemptive military operation was absolutely necessary and the only possible one. Its main goals are the liberation of the entire territory of Donbas.
были и остаются не
They have been and remain unchanged.
Луганская народная
The Luhansk People's Republic has already been almost completely cleared of neo-Nazis.
бои в Донецкой народной
Fighting in the Donetsk People's Republic continues. Here, for 8 years,
оккупационный
the Kiev occupation regime created a deeply echeloned line of long-term fortifications.
их штурм в лоб,
Their direct assault would have resulted in heavy losses.
поэтому наши
Therefore, our military units, as well as the military units of the Donbas republics, act systematically, competently, they use equipment, take care of their personnel,
и шаг за шагом
and step by step they liberate the Donetsk land.
очищают,
They clear cities and towns from neo-Nazis. They provide assistance to people whom the Kiev regime has turned into hostages,
живой щит.
into human shields.
Вы знаете,
As you know,
специальные военные
professional servicemen who do military service under a contract take part in a special military operation.
плечом к плечу вместе с ними сражаются.
Volunteer formations are fighting shoulder to shoulder with them. These are people of different nationalities, professions, ages.
Настоящие
These are real patriots.
они по зову сердца
At the call of their hearts, they came to the defense of Russia and Donbas.
в связи с этим.
In this regard, I have already given instructions to the government and the Ministry of Defense in full and in the shortest possible time to determine the legal status of volunteers,
А также бойцов подразделений.
as well as fighters of the units of the Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics.
Он должен быть таким же, как
It should be the same as for regular servicemen of the Russian army,
включая
including material,
медицинское обеспечение,
medical support,
социальные гарантии.
social guarantees.
Особое внимание должно быть уделено
Particular attention should be paid to organizing the supply of volunteer formations and detachments of the People's Militia of Donbas with equipment.
в ходе решения главных
In the course of solving the main tasks of protecting the Donbas, our troops, based on the plans and decisions of the Ministry of Defense and the General Staff on the general strategy of action, liberated from neo-Nazis and significant territories of the Kherson and Zaporozhye regions,
ряд некоторых
a number of other regions.
в результате
As a result of this,
протяженная
an extended line of combat contact was formed,
которая составляет свыше 1000 километров.
which is over 1,000 kilometers. What do I want to say publicly today for the first time? Already after the start of the special military operation, including at the talks in Istanbul,
Представители Киева
the representatives of Kiev reacted very positively to our proposals.
и эти предложения,
And these proposals primarily concerned ensuring the security of Russia, our interests.
но очевидно, что
But it is obvious that the peaceful solution did not suit the West. Therefore, after reaching certain compromises,
было фактически дано преимущество.
Kiev was actually given a direct order to disrupt all agreements.
Украину
They
стали
began to
еще
pump
больше.
weapons into Ukraine even more.
Киевский режим пустил в ход новые банды
The
иностранных.
Kiev regime launched new gangs of foreign mercenaries and nationalists.
Воинские части, обученные по
Military units trained to NATO standards and under the actual command of Western advisors.
одновременно
At the same time, in the most severe way,
был усилен режим репрессий,
they strengthened the regime of repression throughout Ukraine against their own citizens,
установленный сразу после вооруженного переворота.
established immediately after the armed coup of 2014.
Политика
Their
запугивания,
policy of intimidation,
насилия,
terror, and violence is assuming more and more massive, terrible, barbaric forms. I want to emphasize, we know that the majority of people living in the territories liberated from neo-Nazis, and these are, first of all, the historical lands of Novorossiya,
оказаться под
do not want to be under the yoke of the neo-Nazi regime. In Zaporozhye, in the Kherson region,
Луганске и
in Lugansk and Donetsk,
видели и видят те зверства,
people have seen and continue to see the atrocities committed by neo-Nazis in the occupied areas of the Kharkov region.
наследники бандеровцев и
The heirs of Bandera and Nazi punishers kill people, torture them,
бросают,
throw them in prison, settle scores, crack down on,
измываются над мирными гражданами.
torment civilians.
В Донецкой и Луганской
Before the outbreak of hostilities, more than 7.5 million people lived in the Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics, in the Zaporozhye and Kherson regions.
многие из них
Many of them were forced to become refugees,
покинуть родную.
to leave their homes,
А те, кто остался,
and those who remained, about 5 million people,
сегодня подвергаются постоянным артиллерийским.
are today subjected to constant artillery and rocket fire from neo-Nazi militants.
Они бьют по
They hit hospitals and schools.
устраивают террористические.
They arrange terrorist attacks against civilians.
Мы не можем,
We cannot,
не имеем никакого морального
we have
права,
no moral right to hand over people close to us to be torn apart by executioners.
не можем не откликнуться на их искренние
We must respond to their sincere desire to determine their own destiny.
парламенты.
The parliaments of the People's Republics of Donbas, as well as the military-civilian administrations of the Kherson and Zaporozhye regions,
приняли решение о проведении референдума.
decided to hold referendums on the future of these territories.
И обратились к
They
нам,
turned to us,
России,
to Russia,
с просьбой поддержать.
with a request to support such a step. I'll emphasize,
Мы сделаем всё, чтобы
we will do
обеспечить
everything to provide a safe environment for these referendums
для того, чтобы люди могли
so that people can express their will.
и то решение,
And we will support the decision about their future, which will be made by the majority of residents of the Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics, Zaporozhye and Kherson regions.
уважаемые друзья.
Dear friends, today, our armed forces, as I have already said, operate on the line of contact,
Которое превышает,
which exceeds 1,000 kilometers.
противостоят
They oppose not only neo-Nazi formations, but in fact the entire military machine of the collective West.
этой ситуации.
In this situation, I consider it necessary to make the following decision.
Оно в полной мере адекватно угрозам,
It is fully adequate to the threats we face.
а именно
Namely,
для
in order
защиты
to
нашей
protect our
Родины,
motherland,
ее суверенитета
its
и
sovereignty and territorial integrity,
для обеспечения безопасности.
to ensure the security of our people in the liberated territories,
Считаю необходимым
I consider it necessary to support the proposal of the Ministry of Defense and the General Staff
проведение,
to conduct partial military mobilization in the Russian Federation.
повторяю,
I repeat, we are talking about partial military mobilization.
то есть
That is,
призыву на военную службу будут подлежать только граждане, которые
only
восстановили
citizens who are currently in the reserve
и прежде всего те, кто
and above all those who served in the armed forces, who have certain military specialties and relevant experience, will be subject to conscription. Citizens called up for military service before being sent to units will be required to undergo additional military training, taking into account the experience of a special military operation. I signed a decree on partial military mobilization. In accordance with the law, the chambers of the Federal Assembly, the Federation Council and the State Duma will be officially informed about this today by letters. Mobilization activities will begin today, from 21 September. I instruct the heads of regions to provide all necessary assistance for the work of military commissariats. I will especially emphasize that Russian citizens called up for military service on military mobilization will receive the status, payments and all social guarantees of military personnel serving under a contract. I will add that the decree on partial military mobilization also provides for additional measures to fulfill the state defense order. The heads of defense enterprises are directly responsible for solving the tasks of increasing the production of weapons and military equipment and deploying additional production capacities. In turn, all issues of material, resource and financial support for defense enterprises must be resolved by the government immediately. Dear friends, in its aggressive anti-Russian policy, the West has crossed every line. We constantly hear threats from them against our country, our people. Some irresponsible politicians in the West not only talk about plans to organize the supply of long-range offensive weapons to Ukraine, systems that will allow strikes in the Crimea and other regions of Russia. Such terrorist strikes, including with the use of Western weapons, are already being carried out on the border settlements of the Belgorod and Kursk regions. In real time, using modern systems, aircraft, ships, satellites, strategic drones, NATO conducts reconnaissance throughout southern Russia. In Washington, London, Brussels, they are directly pushing Kyiv to transfer military operations to our territory, no longer hiding. They say that Russia must be defeated by all means on the battlefield, followed by the deprivation of political, economic, cultural, in general, any sovereignty. With the complete plunder of our country, nuclear blackmail was also launched. We are talking not only about the shelling of the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant, encouraged by the West, which threatens with a nuclear catastrophe, but also about the statements of some high-ranking representatives of the leading NATO states about the possibility and admissibility of using weapons of mass destruction against Russia. Nuclear weapons. To those who allow themselves to make such statements about Russia, I would like to remind you that our country also has various means of destruction, and for some components more modern than those of the NATO countries. And if the territorial integrity of our country is threatened, we will certainly use all the means at our disposal to protect Russia and our people. It's not a bluff. The citizens of Russia can be sure that the territorial integrity of our motherland, our independence and freedom will be ensured. I will emphasize this again. With all the means at our disposal, and those who are trying to blackmail us with nuclear weapons should know that the wind rose can also turn in their direction. It is in our historical tradition, in the fate of our people, to stop those who strive for world domination, who threaten with dismemberment and enslavement of our motherland, our fatherland. We will do it again. So it will be. I believe in your support. Dear friends, if you like this video, please subscribe, like and write a comment. This will greatly help the development of this channel. Thank you.